Good morning and welcome to the Morning Breath live stream where we start our day with coherence. I'm your host, Jeremy Tennell, systems designer and coherence coach. And today is week 12, day 60 for our ongoing the path of personal transformation. So today is Freeform Friday, and it's something I've started last week and I think I'll continue. There's no real script. I just want to the idea here is to take the wisdom teachings from the week and to do a little bit of self-reflection with them so that it's not just about me talking, and talking at you. It's also me reflecting on these lessons as well. And so we're going to go through a series of questions. I've run my scripts through chat and had it produce these questions. So I've only read them once. I did not design them. I haven't created answers for them. So that's kind of where we'll go with this. This week's theme was about awareness, and we were revisiting self-reflection, self-awareness, self-regulation, and ongoing self-inquiry. And I want to tell you a little bit about where those concepts came from as far as tools for coherence practices. I think I've mentioned a few times that I am currently writing a dissertation. I finished my coursework for my PhD recently, and I'll spend the next year writing my theoretical framework. My theoretical framework is this. I've spent the past 12 years, 15 years, studying systems and complexity design, which is a framework and a theoretical framework that we utilize in order to understand how things act and react within complex systems. That theory went from a theory to explain computer science from the 1950s to a social theory, or at the very least, a theory for understanding how organizations and even human-built systems operate in the 1970s with Donella Meadows' seminal work, Thinking in Systems. And then in the 1980s and 90s, it began to evolve and develop into a social theory. The thing about the theory is that it is designed in order to observe the world outside of us. It works very well as a model for being able to understand the complex and adaptive nature of the systems that we build and that surround the human system, the natural world. It's effective. And it's effective because it's different than the model that we've developed for the past 600 or 700 years, which is a Cartesian materialist constructionist world. In other words, you look at the parts in order to understand the whole. You break the whole down in order to understand it. But with systems and complexity, that model keeps the whole intact, and it looks at the relationships between each part. The relationship is what becomes important. And that is extremely effective in understanding how systems work. My thesis is basically this: you are the system and the system is you. And so the idea that there's somehow separation between me and the system out here, and that the system is doing these things to me, or that I am a victim of my circumstance, or is actually false. Because systems are made up of the individual parts and how they relate in order to create the whole. And if the individual parts of any human system is human beings, then the nature of the individual human beings within the system determines the nature of the system. Now, certainly, it appears from our standpoint that it is the nature of the system that influences the individuals within it. And there certainly is feedback, for sure. But the hidden secret to change and transformation at the systemic level is not waiting for a new president or waiting for a new policy or changing procedure. These are technical fixes to an existing system. System hasn't changed. The hidden secret is that the individuals who are within the system understand fundamentally that they are the system, and in doing so, their change and transformation over time changes and transforms the system. So that's the theoretical framework that I'm coming up with. The practice that I'm coming up with, what makes it practical, real world, not just theory, is, all right, so if we want coherent systems rather than chaotic systems, which is what we're currently living with now, then we don't concentrate on trying to get the system to be coherent. We concentrate on trying to get the individuals within the system coherent. And the reality is no one can do that for you. You either choose to be a systems designer or you choose to be a systems consumer. And a systems consumer lets things happen to them. And a systems designer takes responsibility and accountability for their own change and for their own transformation. So that's where the ideas that I share with you on this live stream come from. They come from my theoretical framework and my efforts through study to figure out how to make them applicable. And the reality is the only way I can make them applicable is through invitation and relationship, just like systems. That's why you're invited here every morning at 5:30 a.m. in order to practice. So self-reflection, self-awareness, self-regulation, and ongoing self-inquiry are the 4 pillars of this practice, of everything that we do, because they create feedback loops within yourself rather than just reactionary loops. That's where they came from. So on Monday, we were supposed to talk about self-reflection. I was traveling at the time, and I had some technical difficulties. If you tuned in, I was in and out, so we didn't quite make it. But these are the questions that were written for self-reflection. Question number 1: when I look honestly at my life, what patterns have repeated themselves most consistently? And what have those patterns been trying to teach me? I think the pattern that probably, to bring it down to its base form, the pattern that has most consistently come up for me is loneliness. I've mentioned on this podcast that my parents divorced at a very early age, and any child that goes through divorce, whether they're 5 or they're 15 or they're 25 or they're 45, any child of a parental group, whether they are a child or an adult, they're going to carry it with them, and they're not just going to carry the act of the divorce with them. They're going to carry the they're going to carry the arguments and the fighting and the misalignment in the relationship, for however long that goes, and that imprints on us. And so I have, I have definitely worked very hard through counseling. I started seeing a counselor when I was 19 years old on my own. I chose my own. Counseling was never a thing in my household. It's not something we talked about, but I chose to do it. And I've been in, I've worked with counselors all my life since then. But I've worked hard to try and understand this imprinting and how this has affected me. And I think that one of the things that this pattern in my life has revealed is that that brokenness in between my parents created a loneliness in me, and that loneliness wants to be filled. And if I'm not careful, it'll be filled with all kinds of things. It'll be filled with addictive behaviors, or when I was in my 20s, it would be filled with dating relationships. And I don't think that you have to come from a divorced home in order to feel this loneliness. I think that we all want to connect. We all want to feel connected to each other, and our experiences sometimes show us that that can be difficult in a human world. So I think what it's trying to teach me is it's trying to teach me to continue to reach out and continue to learn and continue to grow, and to continue to try and foster relationship. Next question on the subject of self-reflection is, what parts of myself have been hardest to acknowledge honestly? And why do I think I resisted seeing them for a long time? I mean, there's a lot of little things. I think because I started journaling at a young age, and I started counseling at in my young adulthood. Self-reflection's kind of always been a part of it. I may not have done it well back then, but it's always been kind of a part of it. So seeing these hardest to acknowledge areas, I don't know that for quite a while there haven't really been any surprises. I've known these areas for a long time, and what you end up finding over time is that the healing process is lifelong. And I mean, this world is difficult, and it's not going to not be difficult. Pain is a part of the process. And maybe that would be the hardest thing to acknowledge. Pain is part of the process. There's no such thing as a perfect utopian world. This is life, and to stop fighting that process, and to acknowledge that pain is a lesson that can teach, and to avoid repeating painful lessons, is that probably was the biggest and most difficult thing to acknowledge, because we want ease, and we can have ease, but the paradox is you're going to have to deal with the pain first. Last question in self-reflection is, when has self-reflection shifted me from blaming circumstances or others towards taking deeper responsibility for my own growth? Well, I mean, that's the point of self-reflection, is to take responsibility and accountability for what's yours. So it's done that all along the journey. I'd like to think I've gotten better at it, but there's definitely hang-ups and hooks along the way. Tuesday was self-regulation. And self-regulation is the idea of response ability, the ability to choose your response. So, question number one is, what situation or environments most quickly dysregulate me? And what patterns tend to emerge when they do? I just had this come up. Um, and I've been thinking about it all week. I'm 54 years old. My father is 76. Um, we haven't always had a positive relationship. It's been often difficult. However, I would say over the past 6, 7 years, we both worked to try and remedy that. Um, and a lot of that is kind of, you know, it's not about changing them. I can't change him. But it's kind of recognizing that, all right, these are the things that, you know, that don't work in this relationship. And so at the very least, I'm going to not, you know, I'm not going to just throw them out on the table when we're together. So I avoid, you know, politics and religion conversations with him when I can. I just, he doesn't, but I do. And I think that's one of the other things about those kind of relationships in your life is that throwing them out just because you disagree with somebody and even the relationship is difficult is it's harming you, not just them. There's growth there, and honoring your parents wherever you can, however you can, you know, without it crossing some sort of an important boundary for yourself is important. And my father has a temper, and and it's not very rational. And once he gets set off, you know, you know, he wants to rah 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 rah. You know, I mean, you know, he's not violent, but he's certainly vocal and he's loud. And I went down to his place in order to try and get some things fixed and working for him. And I try and do that every couple of months. And and you know, I mean, we can make it 24 hours, all right. 36 hours is pushing it. And at the end of that visit, at the very end of that visit, he lost his temper. And then I lost my temper. And now all week, I'm dealing with the pattern of having to deal with a temper that is typically, you know, regulated. It's not under control. That's not the word I would use. It's regulated. I regulate myself as best I can. And but because that pattern presented itself and I responded to it, it perpetuates until I can kind of tamp out the fires, you know, which is a part of the regulation process. It's kind of sucks, but it's a reality. Question number two. When did I begin realizing that emotional reaction was not always the same thing as emotional honesty? I think that happened in my 20s. So my father's temper. I remember driving home from work. I worked at a restaurant. I was a cook. I was in college, and I'm driving home from the restaurant, and you know, traffic wasn't even that bad, but I was already activated, and I lost my temper in traffic, and I remember hitting the ceiling of the car just angrily, and you know, yelling, not even words, and then something in my back of my head popped up and goes, "What are you doing?" And I thought, "What am I doing?" And it was the first time that actually that was the inspiration for going to counseling. It was the first time that uh, I I was aware that I had taken on my father's temper, for no reason. And I wasn't being emotionally honest. I was just reacting. So that was it. That was the first time. And I went to counseling just a few weeks after that. Question number three: How have practices like breath work, reflection, or nervous system awareness helped me create more space between stimulus and response? You know, that concept of stimulus and response, that's my wife's concept. I remember she was in her graduate work and writing her dissertation, and she came up with this concept of stimulus and response. And it's not. I mean, there are other, there are many other concepts around the space between stimulus and response, but I remember her talking a lot about this in her PhD work. And breath work was another piece to that she brought to the table. She brought that in. She went and got certified with the Institute of Heart Math, which I later became certified with. She introduced me to the practices. That was almost a decade ago. And they've dramatically changed my life. Dramatically. I'm writing a PhD on breath work and heart rate variability. It's um, it's a practice that's been utterly and completely neglected in our society. It's a practice that science is really digging into right now. There are so many studies on heart rate variability and how to engage breath in order to engage the autonomic nervous system, and it changed my life. And so I think it's important to me to help others learn how to do it so they can change theirs. Wednesday was about self awareness, which we specifically targeted the idea of listening to the body. So, question number one was: what physical sensations tell me I'm stressed, activated, or emotionally overwhelmed? And how long did it take me to recognize this? It's a good question. Well, my shoulders go up, right? There's tension, you know. I This part of my forehead crinkles. I've gone years like walking around scowling like this, just fixed. And then, my wife really pointing it out to me, um, and realizing, oh, and I can take a breath and my shoulders can drop and I can relax my forehead. I remember listening to some guided meditation technique years ago, a long time ago. And in the midst of the meditation, the guide said, concentrate on your forehead. Now relax your eyebrows. And I'd never heard anybody say relax your eyebrows. And when they said that and I dropped them, I was like, oh, that's a game changer. So, those were big ones, little ones, but they turned into long-term habits of just being aware of how I'm holding my body. Question number two: have there been moments where my body knew something before my conscious mind admitted it? Absolutely. I I mean, everything from walking into rooms or spaces and feeling like something's wrong or off. Um, I think I've mentioned before that I used to own a construction company. I used to walk into vacant homes quite a bit in the Seattle area. I could feel if somebody was in the house that wasn't supposed to be in the house. Um, I remember walking a vacant home that I was doing an estimate on, and I knew there was somebody downstairs, and there was. And there was a homeless person, a houseless person downstairs that shouldn't have been there, and that intuition is real. And in all honesty, the research is not it's not where it should be on this, but I think that that information is coming through the biofield. It's coming through the electromagnetic field that surrounds your body, that's produced by the heart. It's 6 feet in diameter, comes out from the heart because the heart is an electrical organ. So as far as your arms are stretched wide, right, that's the edge, and it comes out and it goes back in, and it's in constant motion. It's actually plasma, and just like a cell phone signal, which is an electromagnetic signal that is being beamed into your phone and is full of information, your biofield is a transmitter and a receiver as well. And the science definitely points in that direction. We need a lot more study in order to prove it out, but it definitely is pointing in that direction. Question number 3: what practices help me reconnect with awareness of my body, my emotions, and my internal state when life becomes noisy and overwhelming? Well, exercise is one that helps. Getting on my bike, going for a ride, um, being quiet, gardening. Those are all things that will bring me back into that awareness state. All right. Thursday was about self-inquiry, and self-inquiry is really one of my favorites because we live in a society in which certainty and answers are everything. We build everything off of them, and we seek answers. We do not seek questions. And I figured out a few years ago, and it was an important moment for me, that the seeking of the questions is far more important than the seeking of the answers. And that when we pursue questions and inquiry in our life, that when we find the answers to those questions, they should lead to better questions so that we're in constant pursuit of inquiry. When we seek answers in our life and we find those answers, and that's all we're seeking, it's over. The quest is over. The adventure is over. The search is over. You found your answer. So you tuck yourself into your little silo of opinion and bias, and you're good to go. Self-inquiry is vital. Question number 1: what beliefs or assumptions have I held most tightly in my life, and what experience eventually challenged or expanded them? Well, I would say the faith I grew up in. Um, my grandfather was a minister, and we were heavily involved in the church growing up, and I was heavily involved in the church up until my 30s. A number of events happened that made me walk away from the church. And the thing is I didn't walk away from my faith, but I'll tell you exactly how. I won't go into detail right now why I walked away, but I will go into detail what I chose. So I said everything can go. All of the stories, everything can go. I'm going to hold on to one thing. I'm going to hold on to this idea of the Christ, right? I'm going to hold on to this one idea. And I'm going to admit that I don't know what that means. And I don't think anybody really knows what it means. But then I'm going to study, and I'm going to see if I can figure something out. And so I left the church and I began to study. And, if you're familiar with any of the Bible stories, the Israelites, after they left Egypt, ended up wandering in the desert for 40 years. Uh, well, I felt like I was wandering in the desert, and it was a lonely experience. But I read everything I could on on any sort of historical, um, religious, spiritual context. And I found what I was looking for in that process. and I went full circle in many respects. I'm not a Christian because I don't subscribe to the religious label. It's a religion. I am a Christ follower, and I think that is an extremely powerful thing, especially when it is divorced from the shackles of a religion that was been co-opted by power and principalities, if you will. Yeah. So that's the belief or assumption that I've held tightly in my life and challenged and expanded. Question 2. Where do I notice myself becoming defensive instead of curious? And what does that defensiveness protect? Well, it's protecting my ego. Um, and I definitely have one. We all do. It does its job. And sometimes it just does its job very well and too well. Um, I there is something I was called names when I was a kid, unfortunately by my father. I was called stupid a lot, and it really stuck with me. And so being smart became really important to me. I look back though at that kid, and I'm like, he was kind of dumb. Um, but I mean, maybe not all of us, but you know, I was, I was. But and so what has ended up happening, right, is that now I'm in this position where, all right, I've read lots, I've studied a lot, I've raised my knowledge level a lot. So my ego's like, you're smart, right? My ego gets involved, and it's like, well, you're smarter than that guy, you know. So I really have to pull that thing in because I'm not smarter than anybody. Um, I think human beings have an incredible capacity for intelligence, but you have to use it. You got to read a book. There's no way around it. I listen to a lot of books on Audible and a lot, but it's not the same as reading it. I watch YouTube quite a bit. It's very informative. It's not the same as reading. So, yeah, yeah, that's what it protects, and I need to be very cautious of that. Question 3: what would change in my relationships, leadership, or worldview if I became more committed to inquiry than to being right? Whew, that's a big question. That's a good question. Um, being right is so tempting, but being right is the descending into your own personal silo of answers and righteousness. And I still, I mean, I definitely struggle with it, but yeah, you know what, come across some of my YouTube comments, right? Like I work really hard not to be an ass, and I'm not going to call anybody out. That's stupid. But like, I mean, I definitely write comments that are like, well, that's not, blah, 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 blah. It's, it's being right. And, um, I've worked, let's just stay on that because that's a pretty common one today. I work really hard that when somebody responds, either A, I just don't respond back because I'm not going to argue, but B, I try and if it's an intelligent response, I try and ask questions. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? How does that work? Um, because there are things to learn, and I think that's really the key here. How would these things change relationship, leadership, and worldview if I became more committed to inquiry? There are things to learn. There are an infinite. amount of things to learn in the world. And the world wants to decouple us from that learning inquiry process, and it wants to attach us to consumption of answers, consumption of content, consumption of media, and consumption of systems. And that's not being a designer. That's not being a changer. That's not being right. That you're not growing yourself or anything out of that. So everything changes with inquiry. Everything changes with inquiry. Okay, that is the questions for this week. And we, it's, yeah, we went long. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to do some breath work on your own this morning. I'd like you to, when this is over, I'd like you to spend 5 minutes, set a timer on your phone. I'd like you to spend 5 minutes. Inhale through your nose for 5 seconds, 6 seconds. Exhale through your mouth for 5 or 6 seconds. Start a gratitude list if you'd like. Do an awareness check through your body if you'd like. Expand that awareness out to the field and beyond. You can do the breath work how you want. It's not meditation. My recommendation is connect to a positive emotion, and gratitude is the easiest way to do it. And do that for 5 minutes. Create a gratitude list. Start small. Widen it out. And do that on your own. And Monday morning, hit me with a comment on how it went. If this work is still resonating with you, then stay with it. Transformation is not a dramatic event. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. It's a little bit more awareness here and a little bit more honesty with yourself. It's a little bit more space between reaction. It's cultivating humility, and it's building presence. They're small practices. There's something that you just do every day. 5 minutes every morning is a really great start. Coherence is not built through a single breakthrough. It's built through by breath and practice by practice. The quality of your life is deeply shaped by the quality of your awareness. Take a breath. I'll see you Monday morning.